Good morning and happy Tuesday. Last Tuesday before spring break. We are getting there. That is exciting. So today we are going to be looking at the life and music of Clara Schumann. Now, if that last name sounds familiar to you, it's because we have just been studying Robert Schumann, who was her husband. She is, by all regards, as accomplished of a composer and probably more accomplished of a performer than her husband even was. So you will find the reading linked to your Google Classroom assignment as well as on this form so you can read along. I did my best to make it into a nice PDF for you, but I'm never quite sure how they come out when you're reading it on your end. So if you'd rather just listen to me read, that would be fine too. So anyway, Clara Schumann was born in Leipzig, Germany in 1819, and she died in Frankfurt, Germany in 1896. A good long life, especially for that time period. She was a German composer considered to be one of the greatest pianists of all time and a direct influence on the music of Robert Schumann and Johannes Brahms. When Clara Wieck was a little girl, a student of her father's used to tease her with scary stories. He would wait until the room got dark and then dress up as a ghost, making shapes in the dim light. That man was Robert Schumann, and when Clara grew up, she married him. Robert became a brilliant composer, but seeing Clara play at age 9 was what gave him the idea of starting a career in music and studying with her father, one of the leading piano teachers in Germany. Clara's childhood was most unusual. She could hardly talk and was at first thought to be a deaf mute. Her father, her parents were divorced, started giving her piano lessons partly to reassure himself that she could hear. She began speaking normally at age 8 when she was already on her way to becoming a world-famous pianist, already at age 8. Her concerts were so popular that police had to be called in to control the crowds. Fancy desserts were named after her. Poets wrote poems about her. She was nervous before a concert, rarely satisfied with her performance, and often depressed afterwards. But she found touring exhilarating and made dozens of tours outside Germany. In every town, she wore a different white dress every night. Chopin, who we talked about last week, called her the only woman in Germany who can play my music, and that probably was true. And Robert wrote all of his music with her in mind. Your eyes, you romantic girl, he once wrote, follow me everywhere, and I often think one cannot make such music without a bride. That's so sweet. Kind of. Maybe a little creepy. He used some of her melodies, and she premiered his music, which was considered weird all over Europe. She was the famous one during their marriage. She was known as Queen of the Piano, while he was known as Clara Wieck's husband. She was a much better pianist than he and could earn more in 3 weeks than he could in a year. Clara Schumann composed some 23 piano works, and most of her concerts included at least one work of her own. But at age 20, she wrote, I once thought I possessed a creative talent, but I have given up that idea. A woman must not desire to be a composer. Not one has done it, and why should I expect to? Sad. After she was married, she kept performing, but stopped composing. Unable to practice whenever Robert was working, she practiced at night when he went out for a beer. There is not even one little hour in the whole day for myself, she said. Beside teaching piano and organizing all the details of her concert tours, she supervised a household of 3 servants, spent several hours each day writing letters, nursed Robert through several breakdowns, and took care of her children. She had 8 within 16 years. She attributed her energy to the long walks she took each day. I find that weird. If she had the time to take long walks, why didn't she have time to compose music? Who knows? Clara knew everybody. Composers like Franz Liszt, who we'll talk about later, Richard Wagner, who we'll also talk about later, and Felix Mendelssohn, who's like my favorite, came to dinner. Her best friend was Johannes Brahms, 14 years her junior. She inspired much of his music. By rights, he wrote, I should have to inscribe all my best melodies really by Clara Schumann. Newsflash, not just a best friend. She was left a widow at 37 when Robert died in an insane asylum. And we talked about that over the last couple of days, that he threw himself into the Rhine River and had to be rescued and ended up in an insane asylum. To support her family, she turned to performing full time. She had a longer career than any man of the time, 60 years, and a larger repertoire. Only arthritis stopped her performing. As she died at age 77, she asked her grandson to play Robert's music for her. It was the last music she ever heard. So, thinking about all of these other composers that we've talked about, many of them died in their late 20s, in their 30s, in their 40s. Clara Schumann lived to be 77 years old. That is impressive by itself. Here are some musical notes. 3 of Clara's daughters and several granddaughters became piano teachers, and many of her students became prominent teachers as well. One, Carl Friedberg, came to the United States and taught at what is now the Juilliard School of Music. And if you've not heard of that, it's like the top music school that you can go to if you're some kind of amazingly talented person at any musical endeavor. During their first year of marriage, Robert composed more than 130 songs, his chief claim to fame. After their first child, he wrote 3 symphonies in rapid succession. Whenever Clara left on a tour, he was unable to compose, probably because they had 8 kids, and who was going to take care of those kids? Maybe he didn't. Maybe he just missed her. I don't know. Robert wrote some of the best music there is for children learning to play piano, such as Kinderscenen, or Scenes from Childhood, an album for the very young, because of his relationship with Clara when she was a child. So that's a little bit scandalous. He was a lot older than she was, but I think that they really loved each other. At some point, we're going to talk about Johannes Brahms, because in this biography, it talks about how they were best friends, but I have a hunch, and historians have a hunch, that there was more to it than that. And Brahms is another very favorite composer of mine. So I am going to provide for you just some listening to do to some of Clara's works. And then also there is a website that I'm going to have you explore a little bit and just read more about the life of Clara Schumann, just to fill in some of the details that this book did not cover. Incidentally, my daughter is named Clara, and I didn't specifically name her Clara after Clara Schumann. I also enjoy the character Clara from the Nutcracker, but certainly had a little bit of an influence, and it turns out that she's quite a little musician herself at age 9. So there's a little tidbit of info for you. I hope that you have a really great Tuesday, and yeah, keep doing your best, and we'll make it to spring break yet.